Okay, so I'm going to start, and the topic that I want to discuss about Leonard Cohen's poetry, and I'm speaking more about the poems. David spoke about the songs and the poems, but I'm concentrating more on the poems, and particularly the poems that are found in his first poetry volume, The Spice Box of Earth. So we're going to look at that, and the topic that I want to focus in on is this topos that comes up in many of his poems, and that is the topic of light and darkness. And it brings to mind, and one of the associations that it brings to mind, of course, is the Platonic idea of the darkness associated with the body, with the material self, with the material world, and the soul, or the spirit, which is the domain of light. It belongs to the domain of light, which, of course, as it descends into the body in the Platonic idea, it suffers from being in the flesh, and from the excesses of the flesh and the desires of the flesh. So this idea, of course, this darkness and light, the matter and spirit, the body and the soul, and to some extent, a derivative of these topics is the brokenness, which constitutes the brokenness and the fragility of the body, which succumbs to its desires and sinfulness and evil, and the tikkun, which is the reparation, which comes through the cultivation of the spirit and of the soul, and these two dualistic sides of the human being and of the world. And one interesting aspect that, as I was reading up on this idea, I came across, and I think it's very useful in analyzing the topic of sinfulness, evil in Leonard Cohen's poetry and creative output, creative activity, is Paul Ricoeur, who wrote a book on symbolism, the symbolism of evil. And there he also talks about this ontological condition of frailty and of fragmentation and fault that occurs in the human being. However, he takes the position that inherently the human being is not evil. However, evil arises through either something being forced upon us from the outside, which causes suffering, and therefore evil can arise from that, and sinfulness can arise out of that, or it comes from within, from our misuse of our personal and human freedoms. So there are these two aspects, and so it can come from the outside, in which case it's associated in Ricoeur with defilement, or it can come from within, in which case it's associated with a sense of guilt. And sometimes these two things can be intertwined, in that something causes us. There's an overwhelming force coming from the outside, but at the same time we enjoy what this is causing, and so we're bringing our human free will to this and acting on our human free will, and joining this outside and internal force to do evil. So as I was thinking through this, it's very interesting. So on the one side, in Leonard Cohen, we have sort of the spirit. If we want to describe this Kabbalistically, we have the right side of the spiritual, and I think here there's a very important part played by religion. He's constantly being pulled toward religion, spirituality, something that points beyond the physical, something metaphysical, something spiritual. He's constantly being pulled by that. But at the same time, we have the other force pulling him toward the earth, down into the physicality, into the pursuits of matter, of the flesh, of the pleasures of the flesh in every way possible. So on the right, we have the soul, we have the spirit, we have light, and we have life. And on the left side, Kabbalistically, we have the body, we have sin, pleasure, death, and darkness. And in many of his poems and songs, he's battling these two sides. And as I was thinking through this, there's actually a third element, and it really gives a very beautiful Kabbalistic picture, because there's a balancing force. As in Kabbalah, there's the right side and the left side, and in the middle you have the balancing forces of Tiferet, for example, Yesod and Malchut, and Keter at the top. With Leonard Cohen, this balancing force and power is poetry, is creative activity, is the song. It is the song, it is the creative activity through which he's able to unite and subdue and go beyond these two dualistic forces that fight within him. And there's a poem that I just want to quote quickly, which emphasizes this point, and it says, "If it be your will that a voice be true, from this broken hill I will sing to you. From this broken hill all your praises they shall ring, if it be your will to let me sing." It is through singing, it's through my voice, it's through my poetry that that I'm able to, says Cohen, able to ascend from this material world of pleasure, of fragmentation, and a world which falls apart, which decomposes into the world that is eternal, the world of ideas in the Platonic sense, and unite with the heavens, or with the Creator, and with light, if you will. So let's look at the first poem that I selected, which is an inscription for the family spice box. It's at the very end of this volume of poetry, the spice box of the earth. And he says the following. It's a short poem, but there are a lot of very interesting images and symbols in the poem. "Make my body a pomander for worms, and my soul the fragrance of cloves. Let the spoiled Shabbat leave no scent. Keep my mouth from foul speech. Lead your priest from grave to vineyard. Lay him down where air is sweet." So this volume of poetry, by the way, was published in 1961. So it bears the marks of his young life and his youth as a poet. So, what is a pomander for worms? If we look at the second stanza of the poem, the pomander is it's like a ball which has a lot of openings, and you put the spices inside, and as you pick it up and shake it, it gives the scent. So and again, what is this idea? Make my body a pomander for worms. What kind of body do worms like? They like a body that has lived a full life of sinfulness.
You know where most people, at least for me, religious people know pomander from Yom Kippurim, because what happens is that when you are betzom and you can't eat, so they bring you this full of cloves and the
Yeah, and it's also Havdalah. Yes, it's also Havdalah.
The day which all the time the girl is smelling the smell of cloves is a sort of replacement for food.
Yes. And it's interesting that I think in these first two stanzas, "Make my body a pomander for worms," the spice that emits its scent from this pomander is basically the sinfulness of the body. I think I was thinking about this, and I think and that's why it's so attractive to the worms. The worms want to eat you when you're full of sin. If you have been an ascetic throughout your life, if you're thin, you have not engaged in sinful behavior, in the lust of the flesh, the worms will not be so interested in you. Worms want flesh. Worms want something they can take, and of course they're interested in sin.
Is it like a death description of worms coming and eating you?
Yes, also. But why are worms so interested? Why are you fragrance for the worms? your flesh, but I think there's also this sense that the more sin you're bringing with you into the grave, the more the worms are interested in your body, the more you emit this fragrance, like the cloves do in the pomander. And my soul, let it be the fragrance for cloves. So again, he begins with this dualism of the body. Let the body be fragrant with sinfulness, with pleasures of life, well lived, and let my soul be a fragrance for the cloves. Let my soul also be full of spices, perhaps from the creative activity that he pursued in his life. The next two stanzas are very different and very interesting. It was, let me see what you think about deciphering them. Let the spoiled Shabbat leave no scent, keep my mouth from foul speech. What is this doing here? And I think the spoiled Shabbat is a reference to Judaism. It's ritual Judaism for him. It's the ritual aspects of Judaism. I didn't keep the Shabbats were not kept. Let it have no scent. Let it have no meaning in my life. I don't want that part. Let that stay behind wherever it is. I don't want to have anything to do with that. What I do want to have is keep my mouth from foul speech. It's the ethical aspects of the human being. It's the ethical aspects of Judaism that I want to take with myself. I don't want the ritual aspects, the Shabbat, the keeping of the Shabbat, but I do want to be an ethical person, so I would take the ethical aspects with myself. This also is actually an interesting reference to the end of Amidah, where we say, Elohai netzor leshonei mira, v'stefatai medaber mirma. Also an interesting reference to, I think, the end of the Amidah that we say. And then the last stanza, or the last verse, lead your priest from grave to vineyard, lay him down where air is sweet. Grave to vineyard, I think grave in this aspect reinforces the second verse. The grave is Judaism, the ritual aspects of Judaism. Let me not stay in what he perceives as a grave. Let me lead myself into fullness of life, into the pleasures of life, into the vineyard where I drink wine, where I enjoy myself, where I enjoy the pleasures of life. And lay him down where air is sweet. I think to some extent this is a reference to Gan Eden, but the Gan Eden that he finds on earth. It's not a Gan Eden that points beyond the earth. I think here he finds it. Yes. And then that takes me back to the beginning of make my body a pomander for worms. I want to be in air sweet Gan Eden on earth, so that my body can become a pomander for the worms, as well as my soul also is able to attain fragrance through these activities that I will pursue in my life.
אבל מה זה בעצם הגן עדן on earth?
That's interesting.
Pleasures. I think the pleasures
so
of life.
It's a loop. Because if he said that if he's not from the left side, from the right side, okay? And he has been dead. So as a dead man, he comes as his heaven is again to the desires and the heavenly earth, I don't know, the garden of earthly delights, as
Yes.
So it's interesting.
And the way actually, the way I put together these poems, it leads the first 3-4 poems deal a lot more with the earthly delights, and then he moves beyond them, and we'll see that in the poem Out of the Land of Heaven. So he moves beyond that. But these poems at the beginning, he wants to leave behind religion. He wants to leave behind traditional ritual Judaism that he was acquainted with from his youth, and wants to explore everything in the earthly delights that are available.
So we set up for a person non-religious journey.
Yes.
Almost a non-religious journey. Let me dwell in the 7 things of the earthly delights.
Yes.
If you consider the leitmotif here is the essence of the good smell.
The smell.
So he prefers to have his own bodily, warmly desired Dionysi, smell, as opposed to the Shabbat smell.
Yes,
kind of a
that's
very
right.
grateful level.
Yeah. And of course the scent, the rabbis explain that it's aching and very close to spirituality because you don't see it. It's the finest sense that the human being has. And of course, there's much that Kabbalah does with the Akedah, with the Akedah and with the Korban, the smell that ascends to God. So there's much to do here with the scent, this idea of what we smell and what is a scent. Is it material? Is it spiritual? It's something in between, is what the Kabbalah says. It connects the lower world with the upper world. Okay, so we can move to the next poem. It's a little bit different. It doesn't, light and darkness are not so explicit, but in some sense it is. It's a story, that's right, and it's interesting, the title is interesting, Before the Story. Why does he give this title? If anybody has an answer at the end, please let me know.
Huh?
David.
That's before Hallelujah, that's what it means. Because in Hallelujah,
Yes, this is before Hallelujah.
A lot of years before.
Yeah, yeah. And from the roof he saw a woman washing herself, to Shmuel. Far from the roof, the child Absalom is storming through the shadows of the throne, pausing in the dark to smooth his scarlet hair, and we're lying beneath the thrones. Far from the roof, the King David begins the ageless psalm, which rings through caves and tears the cobwebs from the sleeper's face, and we're lying beneath the caves. Far from the roof, the woman, or the girl, Bathsheba, bears her dripping shoulders in a secret room, far from any lover, far from any man, and we're lying beneath the castles. Oh, far from any roof, we're lying beneath the castles among deep branches of silver, and the wilderness moon lives above the whole world, and in her light holds us, cold and splendid in her vast and cloudless night. It's a beautiful image.
Very beautiful image.
What's happening here? So we have the story. We have the biblical story. We have three characters in the story: Absalom, David, and Bathsheba. I don't quite understand Absalom.
בגלל שהוא בהמשך יהיה נקמה בדוד על כל העניין עם אוריה.
Yes, but how is it connected to?
בגלל שזה כאילו לפני, כאילו כבר שם. זה איך שאני הבנתי זה.
What she said, the story is,
לא, אני מבינה, זה בסדר, גם בעברית וגם באנגלית בסדר.
What will happen afterwards, and it's not about David and Bathsheba, it's about Absalom, and this is the, let's say, the pre-story, what's the story before the story.
לא.
Interesting that...
כאילו לפני החטא שלו, האמיתי, כאילו, של להרוג את אוריה, זה איך שאני... לפני כל התועבה האמיתית שנעשתה שם, אז כבר זה היה מונח, כאילו.
And okay, let's keep rolling with this, with these ideas and see where we get with it. So there are two. So where's darkness and light in this story? And as I was thinking this through, basically there's the biblical, and there are interesting plays with time, where there's the present, where we look at the story, and we are lying beneath the thrones, and we're lying beneath the caves, and we're lying beneath the castles. We're sitting here today, and we watch the stories from the caves, from the thrones, from the castles underneath. The present is below. But the story that's taking place in the Bible, that we are sort of rewinding, revisiting, rewatching, is also in the darkness somewhat. Because there's only one light in this particular poem.
Sure.
And that light is above, and that's the light of the moon. There's only one light. So the story from the past, the biblical story, has also no light. We're looking back at it, but we're really not, it's not a light for us. It's not really something that guides us. We watch it, we look at it, we revisit it, we reread it, but it's not really a light. The light comes from above, and the light comes from the moon. And to some extent, the moon, I think, stands in for a goddess figure, or a god. And he envisions this figure, or perhaps he makes a distinction between a god figure who is absent, who we don't see, we cannot see, the masculine, and the Shekhinah, or the feminine figure who we can see, who is there and who is watching over us and who is seeing all of this, who sees the story that happened thousands of years ago, and who sees us in our little caves and underneath the thrones and underneath our castles, and underneath all of this, underneath the layers of history, we think we're above it, but we're, interestingly, in his poetic mind, we're below it. So there's also the past seems hierarchically above the present, and the highest is the moon, which sits above everything and which has seen both our lives in the present as well as the past and everything in between.
כמו Little Jew.
לא, זה מעניין. The moon also stars in Hallelujah, and the moon and the moonlight and her beauty overthrew you.
Yes.
She overthrew you from the throne. That's that interesting, because he's like setting the scene that will come. In a way, it's the minute before you sin. It's the option between going into that route, maybe, I don't know, fatally route because it's like fate has it, and maybe it's like the sin that will come. It's like it's before the sin and after the sin, because you have Avshalom and you have them looking at one another. Interesting. They all have the choices beside Bathsheba. Of course, she's a woman.
And there's I wrote a note for myself.
She
Yes.
doesn't have a choice. From the roof, the woman or the girl, Bathsheba bears a dripping shoulder with a secret root. Interesting.
And it's also interesting that history is tied together through these three elements. The moon, the closest to that is the roof of the houses, which everybody is far from. Both the characters in the past as well as characters or us in the present. And the individuals in the present, and all of them are sort of tied in with history, these three elements.
It's like a flat history that you have a choice to move inside or outside of it, but it's interesting. It's deterministic way to see things.
Yes, and again, if we compare the past existence with the present, there's also an interesting reciprocity that the past, everything that happened, the rebellion of Absalom against the father, the adultery between Bathsheba and David, all these sort of primordial sins and primordial topoi in the history of humankind, the son rebelling against the father committing adultery, and the ensuing fragmentation and fracture that causes in the cosmos and in the world, it all prefigures what happens to every generation that comes after that. Every generation will have these sins and these issues. So the present is already prefigured in the past, and of course the only and then the moon sees it all. The moon is above all of this, and the moon has seen that and has seen this.
אולי גם, כאילו אף אחד לא מלך, למרות שכאילו הוא כן מלך, אבל מתחת לכס. גם אבשלום שכאילו התחרה איתו, כאילו לפני זה. כאילו, כמו שאמרת, שכולנו פשוטים כזה, כולנו מתחת לגג.
Yes, and that's right, there's no king. There's only one king, and then she's a queen. The king is the queen. She is the only one who is permanent in this.
מה, בת שבע?
No, the moon.
כן.
The wilderness moon lives above the whole world. And moonlight. And interesting, the refrain that goes, and we are lying beneath the throne, we're lying beneath the cave, we're lying beneath the cattle. It means even though it's all like a flat history plane, we are still below it. That it has to be relieved again. It's like reverie where you cannot escape your fate.
No, there's that sense.
Each generation has to move through this ordeal again.
Yes,
and
again and again. Yeah.
זה כאילו אנחנו גם בפנים וגם בחוץ.
You have to.
Yeah.
It's like
זה כאילו גם עבר וגם הווה. גם בפנים, כאילו יש
אין
תנועה
כאן, אין
כפולה.
כאן זמן, אני חושבת שאין זמן.
כן, אין זמן. Everything
זה מאוד,
is
כן.
מעורב.
כן.
But there is a hierarchy of
But there is a
yes.
hierarchy, yes.
Fascinating, really.
Yes,
really
yes.
beautiful.
קיצור, יש פה בו זמניות. יש פה איזה סוג של זה יפה, זה מאוד מאוד יפה.
Now let's go to the next poem, which then even gives another twist to this whole history and microhistory and macrohistory, which I think is a very interesting and difficult poem from many angles. Credo. A cloud of grasshoppers rose from where we loved and passed before the sin. Sin, not with a Y, but an I. I wonder what farms they would devour. What slave people would go free because of them. I thought of pyramids overturned, of Pharaoh hanging by the feet, his body smeared. Then my love drew me down to conclude what I had begun. Later, clusters of fern apart we lay. A cloud of grasshoppers passed between us and the moon, going the other way, each one fat and flying slow, not hungry for the leaves and ferns we rested on below. The smell that burning cities give was in the air. Battalions of the wretched, wild with holy promises, soon passed our sleeping place. They ran among the ferns and grass. I had two thoughts: to leave my love and join their wandering, join their holiness, or take my love to the city they had fled, that impoverished world of boil-afflicted flesh and rotting fields could not tempt us from each other. Our ordinary morning lust claimed my body first and made me sane. I must not betray the small oasis where we lie, though only for a time. It is good to live between a ruined house of bondage and a holy promised land. A cloud of grasshoppers will turn another pharaoh upside down. Slaves will build cathedrals for other slaves to burn. It is good to hear the larvae rumbling underground. Good to learn the feet of fears or humble priests trample out of the green. Okay. So we have two scenes that are united in one scene, three scenes. One, a cloud of grasshoppers, tiny little creatures hopping about in great numbers. Another scene is a pair of lovers. They're making love in nature, in the grass, in forest, in the field. And then this is the microhistory, the small history that we see, and the macrohistory again takes us back to the Exodus. The biblical story, the story of the Jewish people coming out of Egypt, the great turning point in Jewish history where Am Yisrael becomes a nation. Mm-hmm. And all these three vignettes are conjoined, are put together into this lovemaking, into this picture in the field. So what is going on? One image that was somehow brought to mind, Kafka, Franz Kafka. This in this poem, I think he loves this sense of the praise of the irrational. This little grasshopper. What is the grasshopper doing in history of the Jewish people in this great universal history? What is the grasshopper doing? Just like in Kafka's Metamorphosis, the person, the man becomes a bug. Again, this macro and micro changing from one entity to another entity. These small characters, small heroes of history that nobody thinks about, like the grasshopper, but yet the grasshoppers changed the history of a whole nation because they came and they devoured the fields of Pharaoh. So the small entities have great roles to play in life sometimes. Another theme in this poem is sleeping, the flesh, and awakening. awakening to religion, awakening to history, awakening to the call of the past of your people, of the religion that you were born into, but he cannot. He wants to stay sleeping in the arms of his lover. He doesn't want to have anything to do with that. The line where he says, I wanted to join their wandering, to join their holiness. I was thinking of getting up from the field, of leaving my lover and join, again, going into light, going beyond, going out of, leaving behind the desires of the flesh, but he could not. And there's also this sense of the grasshopper, of the irrationality, that also he refers to at the end of the poem, that there will be other pharaohs, there will be other cathedrals that will be built and burnt by slaves. History repeats itself, and this image of the larvae, this image of the grasshoppers rumbling underground, I think is a very sinister image, because I think to some extent the larvae and the grasshoppers denote the Jewish people. Busy being, doing their holy work, keeping themselves to the mitzvot, completing the mitzvot. They're thinking that that's the world for them, and yet there's that whole
כן,
yes.
רימה, אני חושב רימה?
רימה, אני חושבת.
רימה זה הדרך לתרגם את זה. כי זה...
busying themselves with their daily holy lives, not understanding that it's the work of Sisyphus. You will not go anywhere. It will not take you anywhere. The adherence to religion, the adherence to the mitzvot will not take you anywhere. There will be others who will build cathedrals. There will be other pharaohs, and the cathedrals will be burnt down. The religious edifices will come to nothing as well, and therefore he lets them do his busy work and continue to enjoy himself in the field and in the arms of his lover. There's also an emptiness of history, a sense of emptiness of history. There's no meaning in history.
Anyway, he turns
I see it
his back.
differently.
Hmm?
I read a whole different poem here.
Okay, so what do you read?
No,
No, what do you read? That's
You
the
say
good-
emptiness, I say this is some sort of beyond pessimism. It's the optimism that lies beyond pessimism. I see it. I've seen more. I've seen less. It's good. It's good. It's a good thing that this shall happen. It's okay. We can have more cathedrals. It's fine.
But what about the larvae? It's a very sinister image.
I don't think what you describe as sinister. I don't think he perceives them as sinister. I don't think when he gives imagery that is normally considered as disgusting or abhorrent or dangerous. If he talks about a skull, if I see a skull on a bottle, it means don't drink this. If I see a skull on Leonard Cohen's bottle, it says drink this. It says different things. A larvae isn't disgusting. A larvae is something different.
But it's underground.
Yes,
Where there's darkness.
underground is very important. It's rumbling underground. It's working there. It's part of that life that comes out that comes out to the green.
אבל עוד פעם,
There's this life here that's happening, even though everything is saturated with past that has already been done and done over and undone many times again. And it's fine. It's all fine.
In a way, it reminds me of some of Bukowski that said when I hear Stravinsky, when the people are being maunim in the basement, I don't know, tortured in the basement.
Tickled.
Tortured. But in a way, the larvae rumbling underground is like a thing that always awaits. It's the hell that awaits all of it below. But it's about the reading. If you see it as some sort of a cosmic circle that in a way like he says here, the slave will be continued for other slaves to burn. There is something about slavery that goes on. That it won't change. We have the now and the earthly lives to rejoice with, but we are telling like the time is. We're out of the time, but this is what happened. This is what happened. So, and again, it's a very deterministic way to see that coming again and again. I see the larvae as not a very good thing in a way, but it's a good thing that it has the full circle coming all around us. But it's just reading anyway.
I see. I have a more negative reading of it.
Yes.
But that's okay. That's
No,
why poetry is like this. That
It's fantastic. But how? But do you see that he looks at it as a saying that it's not a very good thing that this will happen too?
No, I don't think he sees as a good thing or negative thing. I think that he sees that, okay, let them do their little meaningless work like the larvae.
Yes.
They recreate themselves. They do their work, whatever is important for them. But I have nothing to do with them. I let them be underground. I let them do whatever they want to do. And I separate myself, and this is what is meaningful for me. What is meaningful for me is being in my lover's arm, and not being part of that history, the Exodus and Judaism.
למרות שקודם, בשיר הקודם, כמו שראינו, הם גם בחושך, הם נמצאים גם בתוך איזה מערה או משהו כזה.
Yes.
אז זה גם, הוא נמצא שם דווקא, הוא דווקא רואה את עצמו במקום הזה.
Here too he sees it. Again, there's this distancing that I see them, I see what they do, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. I did think about it. I was thinking that perhaps I will join their wandering, join their holiness. There were these two paths in front of me. Either I join their holiness or take my love to the city they had fled. That impoverished world. Again, it's very negative. That impoverished world of boil-afflicted flesh and rotting fields. This is the world I should take my lover to. This is what I should give up my life of pleasure for. So he draws an interesting parallel, I think, between the Exodus, what happened in Egypt, which is boil-afflicted, dying, and then in the previous paragraph he says the smell that burning cities give was in the air. Again, these two worlds, and then the larvae. These are the two negative worlds, and the positive world here, the one that he wants to associate himself with, is the world of pleasure, and nature, the natural, and the delights that can give. That's how I read.
I think I already told them we were about to leave, so let's do 5 more minutes.
Okay. Okay, this is a straightforward poem. The next one, I just read it and then song, and it's fairly straightforward with the books representing the mind and the lust representing the body. Song. When with lust I'm smitten, to my books I then repair, and read what men have written of flesh, forbid but fair. But in these saintly stories of gleaming thigh and breast, of sainthood and its glories, alas, I find no rest. For at each body rare the saintly man disdains, I stare, O God, I stare, my heart is stained with stains. And casting down the holy tombs, I led my eyes where the naked girls with silver combs are combing out their hair. Then each pain my hermits sing flies upward like a spark. I live with the mortal ring of flesh, on flesh I dark. So he makes it much more explicit in this particular poem that although he tries to leave behind and find solace in the world of the spiritual, the intellectual, the world of the mind, of the intelligences in Platonic terms, he cannot. He's really attracted to flesh and the girls with silver combs combing out their hair. And that is when he's able to fly upward like a spark. That is his release.
You know the song "A Thousand Kisses Deep"?
Yes, it's an amazing.
Yes. Because when he looks at it, it's like he's looking at the same thing, but from all over his age and understanding. The girls are young.
Yes.
They're all there to be there.
Yeah, there was a young one.
Zaya and
Yeah,
the ponies ride.
Ponies Run.
I
נשמע באמת
will
זה שיר
put it
יפה.
because it's an amazing song. If you want to.
But let me quickly move to this, because here there's a change. Here's a change of tone in Out of the Land of Heaven, and here's a celebration in this particular poem, while the previous poems were the celebration of the flesh and of the earthly delights. This poem is actually a celebration of the heavenly delights and of spirituality.
Out of the Land of Heaven.
Yes, Out of the Land of Heaven.
Yes,
Okay.
it is.
Out of the land of heaven down comes the warm Sabbath sun into the spice box of earth. The queen will make every Jew her lover. In a white silk coat our rabbi dances up the street, wearing our lawns like a green prayer shawl, brandishing houses like silver flags. Behind him dance his pupils, dancing not so high and chanting the rabbi's prayer, but not so sweet. And who waits for him on a throne at the end of the street? But the Sabbath, the Shabbat queen. Down go his hands into the spice box of earth, and there he finds the fragrant sun for a wedding ring, and draws her wedding finger through. Now back down the street they go, dancing higher than the silver flags. His pupils somewhere have found wives too, and all are chanting the rabbi's song, and leaping high in the perfumed air. Who calls him rabbi? Cart horse and dogs call him rabbi, and he tells them, the queen makes every Jew her lover. And gathering on their green lawns, the people call him rabbi, and fill their mouths with good bread and his happy song.
Wow, that's a very...
It's so rich.
לא, זה שירה שלו, אנחנו תרגמנו את השירים שלו.
אין איזה שיר?
לא, הוא הלחין שיר אחד מהספר הזה, הוא דווקא באלבום המוזר הזה.
מאיזה ספר זה?
ספייס
It's Spice Box of Earth, yeah.
הלחין את... לא, ספייס, כן, זה... True Life Leaves No Scar, the Miss...
זה שירים של איש צעיר שמרגיש את עצמו מאוד זקן.
איזה, The Miss Leaves No Scars. זה השיר היחידי פה שאני
Yeah.
נקרא. זה הולך ככה,
I find
זהו, אני ממש רגיל.
I find that this poem sort of represents the triumph over the desires of the flesh, over sexuality, as the rabbi epitomizes this simple devotion to God, the simplicity of being lost, not in the flesh, but rather
Chassidut, yes,
lost
of
in God, being completely lost in God. And it's very interesting that in this particular poem, the mundane, ordinary sexuality, sexual act gets transfused into unio mystica between the rabbi and the Sabbath queen. So what we saw in the previous poem,
Every Jew.
and every Jew.
Every Jew.
Yes, but the sort of the king here is the rabbi, and the queen is the queen, the Sabbath
Shabbat.
queen, the Shabbat
Malka.
queen, the Malka, and where he was unified with an earthly woman in the previous poem, living in the delights of the flesh. Here, I think that is transfigured into this religious union, the union of the soul of the rabbi with
But
the
nevertheless, he sees it from the outside. I'm not in this picture. This is a picture of the Jew. And Shabbat is actually a kind of a time for wedding.
Mhm.
This is the Jewish experience. But I'm outside. I'm looking at it like
But it all happens
something
in the street.
nostalgic.
yes, and
It happens in the street.
it's
Yeah,
as if he
yeah,
were a
yeah.
part of
I'm watching this from outside.
And interesting enough, his grandfather wasn't a Chassid.
Mhm.
He was from
Litai.
actually Litai.
Mhm.
But here he actually portraits Chassidut.
Yes.
What is it?
And not,
And-
this is not the only poem. This is
There's
this
a Baal
happens
Shem
in
Tov poem
yeah. There's
also.
the butterfly. of
The
Baal
butterfly,
Shem.
yeah, I brought
קבלת
that.
שבת היא השתלטה גם על החסידים והמתנגדים.
Look,
No,
but
but okay,
the
so-
dancing rabbi and everybody, the parade and
Green,
everything.
Elliot Wolfson asked him in an online interview a few years ago. He was writing a text about him.
Me?
Elliot Wolfson. So he asked Leonard Cohen if the very rich gamut of Kabbalistic symbolism and actual quotes in his work, how far does it go? How much did he actually learn Kabbalah? And he starts by saying, and this is very typical. He starts by saying, "Well, of course I haven't studied Kabbalah," but and he knew. Elliot Wolfson knows that if you ask someone that knows something about whether he knows it, he's going to say no, because that's how it's built. But and he says, the little that I have learned from those and those books is about the Sfirot and that, but the biggest influence was actually by talking to Hasidic masters. So he did have contact with Hasidic masters, but I haven't seen any of this in any biography about his contact with them, and it influenced him a lot.
מי חי באזור שלו? חסידויות?
במונטריאול?
לא, חסידים הם לא גרו שם, הם גרו במזרח מונטריאל.
הוא מקוויבק, נכון?
מונטריאל, כן, מונטריאל, כן.
אז אין שמץ של מושג עם איזה מאסטרס הוא דיבר.
אבל יש קבוצות של חסידים במונטריאל. אז יכול להיות, כן, בדיוק. כן.
אבל זה נדיר שיש התכתבות עם החסידות בשירה שלו?
לא, בגלל שזה לא נדיר.
זה לא נדיר.
אם קוראים, אוקיי, מי שיודע חסידות וקורא את השירה שלו, אז הוא אומר, זה לא שיש כאן הופעה של חסידות, זה חסידות. כל השאר, בסדר, אז יש פה עוד כמה הופעות מסביב, אבל זה פעולה חסידית, אבל אז תמיד יש את השאלה של עד כמה רחוק הוא ייקח משהו, כן? אבל הוא הסתובב הרי תקופה ארוכה בלי שהיה לו שם גדול ובלי שהיה לו חשיבות וזה, הוא יושב על הספה של איזה מישהי באנגליה והיא דורשת ממנו לכתוב 3 דפים ביום כדי לצאת ידי חובה שהוא כותב ואז אחרת היא זורקת אותו החוצה. הוא עושה כל מיני, הוא היה תקופה ארוכה שהוא היה מאוד, הוא לא היה צריך לספר לאנשים מה עושה כל רגע נתון, הוא לא היה לנרד כהן, הוא היה רק לנרד כהן. אז הוא הסתובב אתה יכול לפגוש הרבה אנשים כשאתה לא חשוב. זה קצת קשה יותר כשמכירים את השם שלך.
So, okay, I was going to do, but I don't know how much time we have.
Let's try and see if they throw some.
Okay. So the night comes on is the that we should look at. It's a slightly longer poem, but it's again it belongs to this time or this place within Leonard Cohen's poetry and time in life where he focuses more on. Not so much on the flesh, but on the light out of it. The night comes on. I went down to the place where I knew she lay waiting. Under the marble and the snow I said, "Mother, I'm frightened. The thunder and the lightning, I'll never come through this alone." She said, "I'll be with you. My shawl wrapped around you, my hand on your head when you go." And the night came on. It was very calm. I wanted the night to go on, but she said, "Go back to the world." We were fighting in Egypt when they signed this agreement that nobody else had to die. There was this terrible sound and my father went down with a terrible wound in his side. He said, "Try to go on. Take my books, take my gun. Remember, my son, how they lied." And the night comes on. It's very calm. I'd like to pretend that my father was wrong. But you don't want to lie, not to the young. We were locked in this kitchen. I took to religion, and I wondered how long she would stay. I needed so much to have nothing to touch. I've always been greedy that way. But my son and my daughter climbed out of the water, crying, "Papa, you promised to play." And they led me away to the great surprise. It's "Papa, don't peek. Papa, cover your eyes." And they hide in the world. Now I look for her always. I'm lost in this calling. I'm tied to the threads of some prayer, saying, "When will she summon me? When will she come to me? What must I do to prepare?" When she bends to my longing like a willow, like a fountain, she stands in the luminous air, and the night comes on, and it's very calm. I lie in her arms and says, "When I'm gone, I'll be yours. Yours for a song." Now the crickets are singing, the vesper bells ringing, the cat's curled asleep in his chair. I'll go down to the Bill's bar. I can make it that far, and I'll see if my friends are still there. Yes, and here's to the few who forgive what you do, and the fewer who don't even care. and the night comes on. It's very calm. I want to cross over. I want to go home. But she says, go back to the world.
Amazing song.
Amazing
Wow.
song.
Because you don't pay attention to it because the music is like a bit bland, but it's an amazing song. But when you
Yeah.
read it, you actually understand
Yeah.
it much better than when you hear it. The way that she says, "Go back to the world."
Yes,
And he
yes.
calls that home. That is
אבל
home.
יש את ה... כל הזמן זה מופיע אצלו. להיות כאן ולהיות בעולם האחר.
Of course, here again we have the image of the mother, the Shekhinah, who can also be the mother, and the wrapping him in a shawl. I think it also brings the image of the prayer shawl that gives to some extent comfort. And here the figures of the mother, the Shekhinah, and religion are all united by the aspect of the feminine. Religion is also portrayed by him and identified by him as feminine. So again, I think there's a sense that all these feminine images are an image for the spiritual, for the sense of light that he's seeking. But that also constantly eludes him. He wants to go there, he wants to unify himself with it, but it keeps eluding him because things pull him back. Whether what is pulling him back is the flesh, or whether in this particular, in the third verse, it's actually the children. He has things to do. The children are bringing him back. Papa, play with me. Papa, come with me. They are pulling him back from the world of spirituality and the world of the mundane, of the living world. You have to live. You have to be present in our lives and in our world. You can't ascend into the higher realms just yet. But he's ready, and we see that a very different tone is deployed in this poem by Cohen. He feels much more closer to the Gog, to the roof. He's closer to the sun and to the moon and to the light than he was in his previous poems. But he cannot leave yet, just
מי
yet.
אומר לו בסוף לחזור? האמא?
האמא, כן. הוא רוצה, זה מה שגם
הוא רוצה
הילדים
כבר
תופסים את זה. הוא רוצה
גם
לבוא
הילדים
כבר
וגם
ללכת
האמא.
לחזור אליה, זה גם כן, ראיתם כמה זה חשובה בחייו. השיר הזה בהחלט מדבר על זה, אבל זה מרתק, כי גם זו תחייה מהעולם הרוחני נטו, לכאורה, להישאר בתוך האולימפוס הזה.
כן, הוא כל הזמן רוצה לברוח מהריטואלים, מהמציאות, מהמצוות,
לא, אבל פה הוא רוצה לברוח מהעולם הגשמי.
כן, גם הילדים שלו, הם מכריחים אותו, תופסים אותו.
מהנוכחות החומרית של החיים, כאילו.
And there's also the sense that not only does he have to come back into the material world for his relatives and for his children and for the things that he still has to do, he has to come back for his poetry, for his song. That this song kind of becomes a korban, a sacrifice that he can offer while still being in the physical world and in the sense. And again, connecting the physical and the spiritual. It is the song that unifies these two realms, both in his life as well as symbolically or metaphorically. להתראות. And so I will close with this last image with which emphasizes and ties together everything that I said, which he aligned in his poem Anthem, that there's a crack in everything, and that's how the light gets in. That even though we live in a fragmented world, even though we live in a world that is incomplete, that is subject to change and subject to deterioration and fall, there's a purpose for all the bad things, all the evil, all the negative things in the world, because they allow the light to come in. And the light, even though we live in the flesh, the soul seeks ways, such as through creative activities, such as through song and poetry, to make its way through the darkness of matter and of material existence.
I'll just.
Wow.
I wanna comment about the entire theme of darkness and light from another aspect of the aesthetics of Leonard Cohen, his influence by Loka, where the entire gamut of his work is basically 6 chords that he learned as a child as a teenager from a Spanish guitar teacher that he hired to teach him a little bit, and whenever you see him play in any interview, he afterwards he will admit, I'm doing just one thing. I only know how to do one
thing.
one chop. That's my chop, and it's enough. And the thing is that his Spanish influence, a very strong part of it is what's called sola sombre, where you have it comes from sitting and watching the spectacle, and it's a day-long thing. So you have seats that are part of the that are in shadow all day, and seats that are part in the light all day, and then there are seats that experience both shadow and light. So they're both sol and sombre, and they're and it's this style that goes into the kind of work that Loka does, and it influences Leonard Cohen very much, and you can see that. I mean, as a complementary aspect to the Kabbalistic side, there's the right vessel for it.
That's interesting.
Thank you very much.
No, thank you.
We have to-